Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to today's webinar on maximizing your catalog organization with my guest, Jordan. Jordan, hopefully you should be lurking there in the background. Can you hear us, Jordan?
I'm here. Hello, hello.
Hey, hello, hello. So if this is your first webinar and you don't know who this voice is, I'm the guy at the top. So my name's David. I'm part of the software sales team based out of Copenhagen in Denmark. And through the magic of the internet, Jordan is over in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was going to say Philadelphia then, but Pennsylvania is correct, isn't it?
Close enough, close enough.
Close enough. PA, anyway, we can get it that far, over in the USA. So this is the second webinar we've done today. We made Jordan get up at 4 o'clock this morning to do the first one. So you should be pretty lively by now, I would think.
Yeah, nothing a little tea and caffeine can't hurt.
Exactly. So we have 60 minutes. You're very welcome and encouraged to ask questions throughout. Some of you have found that already, so hello to you guys. If you look at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel, put a question in there that will come straight through to me. I'll just moderate those for Jordan. Try to keep your questions, if you can, on today's subject. Just makes it easier for me and Jordan and for everyone else listening as well. I am recording the session too, so don't feel you have to remember everything. You can just watch it again on our YouTube channel. You'll get a playlist in a follow-up email in roughly 1 hour's time, and the recording will go up sometime tomorrow, I would think. So I think that dispenses with, let's just get over to Capture One. So what Jordan and I thought we'd do today, so this webinar is really about trying to give you some inspiration on the possibilities of what you can achieve if you organize a catalog well, with a goal to being able to find images quickly and just have a really good structure to help you with your workflow, basically. Now, Jordan, your background was, hang on, I should bring up your website as well. Let's do that. Your background was originally with Aperture, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. I was a software trainer and full-time photographer.
Excellent. So at some point you decided to switch from Aperture to Capture One. Was that relatively recently? I can't remember.
It was about a year ago. It should have been a lot sooner, but yeah.
About a year ago, which is good because Aperture, for anything we can say about Aperture, we certainly can't knock its organizational capabilities and database capabilities. So I think most people who came from Aperture are very well used to all the great stuff that Aperture could do for image organization, and have brought that kind of knowledge from Aperture across to Capture One. Those people on Lightroom, I mean, Lightroom still has a very robust database, of course, but the possibilities in Aperture seem to be a little bit more extensive for organization. So it's good to have you here, Jordan, so we can learn in that respect about projects and so on and so forth.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. So what I thought the first thing we would do is, on Capture One, thank you, is I'm just going to very briefly spend 5 minutes and talk about the various different organizational items that we have in a Capture One catalog, just so you know the terminology. If you're looking to kind of go back to basics a bit more, what I can suggest you do as a kind of a prelude to this webinar is to have a look on our YouTube channel. You'll get details of the channel in the follow-up email, but if you really need to go straight back to the beginning, if you have a look at managing a Capture One catalog in the tutorials here, and also if we look at Capture One webinars, there's a getting started webinar right here as well, which really takes you back to the beginning. But the purpose of today's webinar was just to really also give you an insight in all the powerful things that you can do in a catalog. So as I said, I'll describe the sort of organizational items that we can use in Capture One. Then we're going to go over to Jordan and see how his catalog is set up, because he's really done some smart stuff with it. So in this catalog that you can see here, it's just a small catalog I set up quickly. It has some images stored in an external hard drive called image catalog, this one here, and we just have a nested set of folders like so, which is reflected exactly like that in the folders tool of Capture One. What we can do, of course, is organize at system level just by moving images between folders and so on and so forth, and it's perfectly fine to do that, but you're much more limited with the organization possibilities that you can do, for the main reason that because we're organizing at system level in folders like so, that ideally and sensibly we don't want the same raw file, or I should say we don't want to duplicate raw files. So if a raw file, if you want to have it existing one folder, two folders, three folders, it's not actually possible without duplicating it. Because we might like to have a collection of images here, then we might like to have a further collection of images that we want to target towards making a portfolio or printing, hanging on our wall, sending to a particular client, and so on. And we can't do that at system level without duplicating the raw file. And it's total madness to duplicate raw files because you're taking up hard drive space, you don't know which one is current, and so on. So there is limitations to organizing at the system level, which is where in Capture One, the user collections area is extremely powerful. Because any organization that happens here is what we call virtual, as in that we're not moving any images around on disk, we're using the power of the database to track the location of images and so on. So in our user collections area, if we just go to all images in the catalog, in our user collections area we have a plus and a minus button right here, and these allow us to create 4 different organizational items, and I'll just very quickly explain what each one is. So the first one is an album. So if I say let's make an album, let's just call this, let's say we just want to make an album of some landscape shots, for example. Then an album just allows us to drag single images or collections or groups of images into that collection, which we can then see like so. Now, we haven't moved anything on disk. We're just using this album as a storage. So images could come from anywhere. I could grab images from this folder, we could grab images from this folder, and so on. And again, nothing is being moved around on disk, it's just a virtual pointer to where they are. So it also means if we, let's just make another album, say stuff to print, for example, then there's nothing to stop the same image existing in 2 different locations, as you can see, like so, which gives us much more flexibility. Next one we have a smart album. So similar to an album, except it populates itself based on search criteria. So it's dynamic. The contents of it will change depending on that criteria. To give you a very, very simple example, it could be something based on star ratings. So if I say it's got 4 to 5 star rating, we can either build our search criteria by clicking on the plus button here and choosing from more than 60 different monikers, or if you like, search criteria, or we can just use a simple preset up here, and I'll just choose 4 stars or higher, and that automatically loads the criteria in for me. So now any image that fits that criteria, a 4 to 5 star rating, in my catalog will be automatically loaded in like so. And as it's dynamic, if I grab an image and let's just change that to 3 stars, then it disappears. So Smart Album populates itself based on the search criteria that you decide to set. Third one, project. Now project is where it really gets powerful, and you'll see how Jordan uses this. The whole purpose of a project is to just neatly arrange your catalog into different projects, funnily enough. So let's say we're going to do a new portfolio book, for example. This is the start of this project. So new portfolio book. You'll see the icon of the project looks ever so slightly different to the others. It looks like a cardboard box with a lid on it, basically. Now, if I try and drag images into this project, you see it doesn't work. Project, which is different to Aperture, which tripped up Jordan, and we'll come to that in a second.
Yes.
Yeah, because in Aperture you can drop an image straight into a project. So of course, if you're coming from Aperture, then it's a little bit strange. So if we right click on this project and say new inside, we can drop an album in there, and I'll just call this all images. So I'm starting to build a project basically. So I go to my catalog and think, well, what could be nice for my portfolio? Let's have Kaunos, let's have some architecture, let's have a few wedding bits, and so on. So now I'm starting to build a project like so. Now the real power of the smart album, of the project, is that it limits the scope of a smart album. So if I right click in here and add a smart album, let's do the same thing, 4 to 5 star, like so. 4 to 5 star rating, and say OK. Now you'll see that out of these 5 images, 2 of them fit that criteria. So if I click on this, oh, it helps if I actually set the criteria. So let's edit that smart album. I did that on purpose so you could see that, of course. Honest. So you can see out of these 5 images, we've got 2 that fit that criteria. So when I look on here, we only see that 2 because this smart album is only searching in that project. Whereas this smart album has many more images into it and searches the entire catalog because it's sitting outside of any project. Now, a couple of you asked, where I don't see any numbers next to the smart album. That's correct. You don't see a number here, but you do see a number at the top. It's a long discussion with R&D why there isn't a number there, one of those kind of curious engineering examples, but you can see a number up here, just not next to the smart album itself. So that makes the project item extremely powerful and just helps you to organize your area, of course. Last but not least, we've got if we go back to all images, we've got a very simple item called a group. And a group is just really like a folder on Windows Explorer or the Mac Finder. It just helps you to organize this area a little better. Because you could imagine once you end up with sort of 50, 60 projects here, this list gets very long. So you could use a group to perhaps group projects by your professional work or private work. You can see within a project, I've got a group which just groups these different albums of photographers and so on. So it's a free form organizational item is what it's known as. So it has no special properties, just helps you keep this area tidy. So album, simple collection. Smart album fills itself based on the criteria. Project allows you to organize better and limits the search scope of a smart album. And group allows you to just keep this area nice and tidy. So before we hand over to Jordan, I'll just check your questions. Let's see, can Capture One be used as an offline manager? Yes. So what Frank is asking is if I were to eject my image catalog disk here, I would still be able to see all of my catalog. I would still be able to make edits, adjustments, add metadata. The only thing I couldn't do would be to export high resolution images. But yes, that's entirely possible. Okay. The boundaries that a smart album will look in, Robin, good question, hope you understand now. If the smart album is outside of any project, you see this one here is just sitting in user collection, searches the entire catalog. If it's within a project, it's that project only. So there we go. Okay, some of your other more specific questions I will answer on text. The last one is, can I see images in the browser and what collections are they aligned to? No, that isn't an available filter. You can right click and say show in Finder. You can actually say show in library, and that will show me where it is in the library as such, like so. So you can do basic operations like that if that's what you meant, but not necessarily in what collection it belongs to. Okay, okay, Andrew says that's it, that's what he wanted. So it's a right click, show in library, show in Finder. So if you are in an image like this and you want to know exactly where it is, show in library, it'll go down here and show it to me like so. Okay, I think that's enough of me waffling on for the minute. I'm going to give you control, Jordan. So let me make you the presenter. Help if that's strange. When I go to webinar panel. There we go. It's being a little stubborn. Hang on. It's not liking Wacom for some reason. Sorry guys, I'm trying to, there we go. Right, make presenter. So Jordan, you should be able to accept the presentership in a second. I hope.
Oh, there it is. Yep, I see it.
You got it? Good stuff. So
how's that?
yep, we can see your screen and your finder, so that's great. And to kick off our discussion, the way you have decided to organize and the way you did to some extent in Aperture is to have a catalogue per year as such.
That's correct, yeah. So what you're looking at here, I have a couple of RAID arrays connected to my MacBook. I have a library in Aperture or catalog in Capture One per year. So on this particular device, all I have to do is open it up and I can see all of my catalogs in chronological order. So everything here is self-contained, they're all managed. I'm not going to be hunting all over the computer to try to find my files. They're all in one nice, neat, tidy place. I work off of the RAID a lot. It is a Thunderbolt RAID. It's pretty snappy. I haven't had too much challenge there. Unless I'm working in the field or traveling, then I'll work off of the internal. It is an SSD. It's pretty quick, but yeah, I haven't had too much trouble with the RAID. So let's go ahead and open up Capture One here. We're going to go to the 2016 library. I've got a bit more to show off as opposed to this year, 12 days. So,
yeah, I'd be impressed if you had an extensive catalogue within 12 days, yes.
yeah, give me a few weeks, we'll work on that, yeah. So what you're looking at now is the inside of that catalog, and what I should mention before I get too carried away is the size. So this Capture One catalog has 528 gigs in it, and the library itself, I believe, has around 57,000. Wait a minute, no, this one, because they imported an Aperture library, has a bit more to it. So again, working on a RAID array over Thunderbolt, haven't had too much of a problem here. One of the reasons I like to keep it in an annual library is you have to set a limit at some point, and I think an annual startup gives you kind of a fresh start at the beginning of the year, and it sort of it loads quickly. It's a little more modular. You can move it from hard drive to hard drive if you need to, especially with USB 3 or Thunderbolt. It's pretty fast, relatively speaking, and then it also minimizes any potential problems. So you have everything sort of capped at 1 year. If there's an issue with the catalog, then it's just limited to that year. Of course, that depends on how often you photograph and what you do. You might want to break it down a little more or a little less.
Yeah, and I think that's a good advice as such. I mean, I've been working on the same catalogue for, I don't know, 7 odd years now or something like that. And because I didn't start off necessarily in the best organizational manner, it kind of has various different strategies of organization throughout it. So I think good advice from you definitely and others is kicking off the new year with a new catalog is sometimes quite a smart way to go. And I should point out, because we're looking at your various catalogs here, and you can see the size of Jordan's catalogs, like your 2016 catalog is 500 odd gig, your 2017 is probably a bit smaller than that, I would think. And there's 2 different options. Those of you on Aperture will know this very well, but in Capture One you can store images as managed images where they're actually stored inside that catalog file that we're looking at the moment, or like I showed you, they can be referenced, as in the images can be stored on external hard drives, internal hard drives, across a variety of hard drives and so on. Now, although those of you using Aperture were quite a fan of the managed image, the only disadvantage of that is that you tend to need big hard drives so that you can fit the larger catalogs in, and you can't spread images across a number of
Right.
sources, but I guess it makes it very easy to manage. You don't have to think about where your images are going to be. If you want to move the entire catalog from one hard drive to another, that's a really simple operation as well.
Totally. Yeah. If you needed to move it from an internal to an external hard drive, as you're growing, that's very simple to do.
Yeah, very simple. Like if that catalog suddenly got too big for Zeus, even though Zeus sounds pretty big and powerful, you can easily drag that off to a brand new disk and just keep on letting it grow, basically.
Right. Right. Yep. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Hopefully that doesn't happen for a while. 7.5
No,
terabyte.
7.5 terabyte,
A little
that's
bit.
pretty, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So hard drives are cheap. They're not that cheap.
Yeah. So let's get in, I guess, get into a little bit about, so your 2016 catalog, a couple of people asked about it, that you stated that you imported your Aperture library. Could you just show file import so people know where that is?
Sure. So there's a few things that you can import in Capture One. If I come up here to File, I have an option to import a catalog.
Yep.
And this is pretty fundamental to my everyday workflow as well as switching from Aperture. The first, you can import a Capture One catalog, which would include a session. That's how I work. For transition, you can import an Aperture library, and what that will do is it will simply reference the library wherever it sits on your hard drive. So in my case, my 2016 catalog is sort of a hybrid between the two. I kind of transitioned one bit at a time as my confidence grew. So down here in the 2016 Capture One catalog, my Aperture catalog loaded. So this is simply referencing the Aperture library. I can still open it in Aperture separately if I want, but I can then come in here and I have all the benefits of Capture One with the workflow, with the color processor and everything from there.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as well, that when we import an Aperture library or a Lightroom library, similar process, that we don't move any images at all. It's read-only of your Aperture or Lightroom catalog. We don't change anything, we don't touch anything, so it's simply reading the location of your images and the adjustments and metadata and ratings and that stuff. So we can bring that into Capture One, we can make new Capture One previews, we can read that adjustment data, but we don't move any images. So it's kind of a good way to compare what Capture One can do compared to Aperture and Lightroom as such. I probably wouldn't suggest the very first thing you do if you're on a Capture One trial is to attempt to import 200,000 images from an Aperture library, because it does take a long time because we have to make all the previews. But by all means, export a collection of 1,000 images from Aperture or Lightroom, and then have a play with them in Capture One. And then once you're happy with the way Capture One works and the organizational structure you want to put in place, then's a good time to go the whole hog and import everything, which I think is what you did as well, Jordan.
Yeah, actually, I've only recently imported the Aperture library into Capture One, and I had every intention of rearranging everything, but I haven't had a need. So that's been a relatively new thing. I would definitely advise not jumping in head first that way. There's no need. You don't have to put yourself through that trouble at all.
Exactly. That's something to do once you're set up and happy. In the early stages of learning an application, then go easy on yourself. Get to grips with it, figure out how you want to organize, because Capture One is different to Aperture and Lightroom and so on in that respect. So get your strategy down, and then you can make the big jump and import everything.
Right. A lot of it, I would say, is about translating between the two, getting it set
Yes.
up to look and work the same way, changing your shortcut keys, which we can go over in a bit. Anything that you can do to familiarize yourself with it will make it a lot less of a stress when you make the transition, for sure.
Exactly, and that's probably a good thing to mention now, because I notice you have your tools on the right, the tool tabs and the tools. By default, they're on the left, but pretty much any element of Capture One you can put wherever you like. The goal being that the workspace that we design, of course, is not going to fit every single person in the world. We have this ongoing discussion in R&D that we all think we have the best personal workspace, and no single person uses it the same. So there's no reason why you should. So spend a bit of time in customizing, moving stuff around, getting rid of tools that you're just scrolling past and not using, and make it work for you, not the other way around.
Right. And even within that, every task might command a different workspace. So when I'm out tethering in the field, that's definitely something I want to change. I want to be able to come up here quickly and choose a workspace that works for what I'm doing at the time. Or if I just want to simply browse through photographs for rating them, to rate a photograph, you're simply hitting 1 through 5 on the keyboard. That will change the rating. Let me let this view change. There we go. So we've got, actually this is set up so that it will remove a filter if it remove the photo if it changed the number. So if I hit 1, it disappears. If I bring it back, it's still there. And same with color labels. For my Mac, I have it set up to be Command, or on a PC it would be Control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to change the color label. I'll bring back the tools here. There we go. Great. And if you want to customize any of those shortcuts, we went over this a little bit earlier. Capture One, edit keyboard shortcuts. You can create your own shortcuts for the software. This was a huge thing for me, changing software. It drove me absolutely mad the first few times I used it, and it wasn't until I changed the shortcuts and it was so easy to do that everything started to make sense. So you can view those. I'm looking at the adjustments for color labels, and simply hit close and you're up to date.
Fantastic.
All right. Great. So yeah, so this workspace is set up for how I like to work. This is where I am most of the time. I really don't deal a whole lot with catalog collections at the top. When I start a new project, if I'm photographing, usually I will start by making the project first, so that when I import, or if I'm tethering, I've got a place for those photos to go already. You can do it after the fact, but I just find it easier as I'm going to work that way. I'm going to switch gears here real quickly, just to show a simplified view of what we're working with. If this is the first time you're using Capture One and you start off with a user collection, it will look like this. The biggest change is over here on the right. The user collection, in this case, only has one project. So if I'm photographing remotely, if I'm shooting tethered, which is an absolutely wonderful feature of Capture One, everything will come into this catalog, and I can later import it into my 2016 catalog when I get back to my desk. So everything is tied together in that way. You can import, and one nice thing with Capture One is you can have multiple catalogs open at one time, which is not something that Aperture could let you do. So if you want to switch between this view for 2016 and then jump back to your other catalog, very simple. And I even have a third open currently for 2017, which is still pretty much a blank slate.
Yep. And as if people didn't twig there, unlike Aperture and Lightroom, you can have multiple catalogs open at the same time. We treat a catalog just as a document, like opening a document in Word or a PDF or any other application. So if you want to nip between two different catalogs, like you saw Jordan just do, that's perfectly easy to do. You don't have to restart the app. You can browse as Jordan's doing it there as well, so recent catalogs, and it will just happily snap between the two as well.
Perfect.
So
great.
Before we move on, I just want to dig into a couple of common questions which popped up. So
Sure.
A couple have asked, if your catalog gets too big, can you split it? And it is possible you can export originals from a catalog. Any project, you can right click on it and export that as a catalog. So if your catalog does get too big, you can see there, export as catalog. So there's lots of different ways to chop up a catalog. You can merge catalogs together, and so on and so forth. So it's very, very flexible in that regard. And as Jordan said, if you're out in the field shooting, you'll shoot to a subcatalog and then import that into your master catalog. So that works works pretty nicely as well. A couple of people asked, what was your reason for using managed images as opposed to referenced? Is that just harking back to the days of Aperture, I guess?
Yeah, in part. I guess it was just that's how my mind works, is having everything in one place like that, not having to hunt it down. I really don't think about the location after the images are in Capture One.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it just depends on how you work. I know some people who have a different session or catalog for every project that they have, but I think that keeping them together like that is very easy. And I've always used a larger hard drive, so portability hasn't been that much of an issue. Some of these libraries can get pretty big. That one's 2.37 terabytes, 1.96, so they can get up there. But yeah, I wouldn't really think to do it any other way personally, but that's my preference. Yours might be different.
Yeah, I think we offer both. So there is pros and cons to other. I think as we said, the pros of the managed images means that you don't have to think about organizing the system. Capture One does that for you. You organize everything with user collections, but you can run out of space if your catalog gets too big. If you're organizing with referenced images, you can visibly see it on the system, which probably really isn't much of an advantage as opposed to a psychological one as being able to see them. And it does allow you to spread images across multiple different storage mediums if you wish. In practice, very few people do that, but as I said this morning, people who've come from Lightroom tend to organize at system level. People who've come from Aperture, because Aperture tended to push you towards using managed images, tend to do the same in Capture One. So I think it's just habit. They both work equally well. It just really depends on your needs.
Yeah, and I think Capture One gets a lot of credit for its raw processing, but its organizational capabilities are also very robust. I think that's a very strong point of it. And coming from Aperture, that was basically Aperture's strength. And I would say that Capture One compares very nicely to that.
Exactly. So shall we have a look at some of your examples to see how you actually organize a project as such? If we start from the top level and then what you have in going on beyond that. So like Road Trip South or Weddings or any of the others, basically.
Sure. So I'm using groups to organize every one of my genres, we'll call it, or categories. So I want to keep my personal work separate from my commercial, my portraiture separate from weddings, anything like that. Very easy to stay on task that way. If you're color correcting or rating photographs, you can see very easily what you're working with. These are all drag and drop, so these can all be moved around if you prefer, whatever order you're looking for. So within any one of these groups are going to be a number of projects. So this is an example of a road trip south I took recently for work. Photographed every day, and as I was traveling, this project was my library, or my catalog. That was my Capture One catalog on my MacBook hard drive, and then when I returned to my office, I went into File, Import Catalog, and Import Capture One catalog, and it made a copy of it in my 2016 catalog. So very seamless to move around in that way, similar to how Aperture also worked. Where it does get a little different is with projects, and David sort of already alluded to this a bit. This absolutely drove me crazy when I was transitioning, and it's the simplest little thing, but projects don't house photographs inherently. They will house things such as an album or a smart album, and that's an album is where your photographs can live. So in this case, for the 14th of November, I have a trip on the Kentucky Ribbon Trail. I have an album called Raw, which is going to contain everything from that particular day, or however you would want to break that up. You could break it down by different location, so venue, for example. And then within that, I have a smart album enabled. And that's really, in my opinion, where the power of using a user collection is at its strongest, and I think you would probably agree with that. David, which is
Definitely.
why we're
Definitely.
here.
Yep.
Um, so in my normal workflow, this is sort of the structure that I have for every single project I take on. You'll see a repetition here that starts to pop up with a few variances, and that will depend on how you are using the software and what it is you want it to do. But generally speaking, when I'm importing, I'm creating the project first and then the album, and then I'm importing into that album. My next step from there would be to rate the photographs. So I would go through and assign a number rating, 1 through 5, or a color label. If you get into keywording, that's another opportunity there for sorting. I personally don't use keywording just because it doesn't fit my workflow, but it's a very powerful feature in Capture One. So as we're working here, you'll see the raw again for each project. If it loads, there we go, and then the final filter. So this is the Smart Album. I'm going to right-click on that, and we have the option to edit. So you'll see a little bit more of the filtering capabilities we have here, and this is something we should spend quite a bit of time on. But right now, I have this set up as finals, and it looks like there's a typo. There we go. And I have it set to rate for any 1-star image or greater. And there are presets at the top, so I can just check the first one, or if there's a different selection I'd like, I can quickly change it. And as you'll see, the Smart Album updates instantly, automatic feedback. And this is while I'm editing. I'm not even looking through a filter, I'm just looking at the Smart Album itself. You can add additional criteria, which can be useful. So you can have it search all of the following rules or any of the following rules if you want to expand the search rather than limit it. I use color tags in addition to number ratings quite a bit. So what that might look like, we'll come down here to this day in New Orleans. I kind of have a thing for food if you can't tell. Right, so hanging out in French Quarter here. So I've got my finals folder. This is set up based on a star rating. Now my selects folder, and this could be social media, Instagram, print. If there's someone you want to give the photographs to, such as a friend or client, depending on what you're doing, you can do that. So in this case, I'm going to add a second rating of a color tag, and I'm going to set it to be magenta. So now, because all are selected, there must be a 5-star rating along with a magenta color label, and that will update. So tons of uses for that. Just depends on what it is you want to accomplish, what you're trying to do. But that's basically the essence of Smart Albums.
And Smart Albums are really handy, and what you've shown is like just, I guess, a relatively sort of simple Smart Album, but you can keep adding and adding and adding multiple search criteria to an album where they can be pretty extensive. So we've got rating is greater than or equal to 1, but as Jordan's doing, you can just keep hitting plus, and then you can narrow it down. So it could be the rating has to be 4 or 5. It has to be shot within a particular time period. It must be with your Canon 50mm f1.4, and you want to make sure that you shot with the aperture wide open, for example. So there really is no limit, and because you're searching a database, not searching through like a RAID with 500 gigabytes of images, all you're searching is a catalog database. The results, as you saw, were near instantaneous. So even as you edit the criteria of a Smart Album, it's happening on the screen right in front of you. So it's way more efficient than just searching across big hard drives. And that's kind of the frustrating thing when you know, we hear people say, well, I don't want to set up a catalog. You can't really, if you want to have really good organization and find images quickly, it's pretty impossible not to do that without a catalog if you want high performance. So yes, I know it's annoying sometimes that you have to go through this import process, but the benefit is really then being able to search a database, not having to search through tons of hard drives, and returning those results in instantaneous time frame as well.
exactly.
Mm.
There's a tool in the tool menu here called filter. We talked about this a little bit earlier this morning, David.
Yes.
I added a few more filters as a default, so you can kind of get an idea of what are some of those searchable criteria already built in that you just referenced. So here we can go through by focal length, your ISO speed. You can do aperture, camera owner. That could be useful if you have multiple photographers working on the same project and you want to find
Definitely.
one person's image. Can be useful to see how you photograph, to see what focal lengths you're at most of the time.
Hmm.
I'm at 24, it seems quite a bit, so maybe I should get a fixed 24.
Yep.
Might be a good leveraging tool there. Um, right, so those are just, and that's another way that you can filter. And as I go through here and start ticking some of these off, you'll see the selection on the left immediately update. I haven't moved anything, I haven't deleted anything, everything's still where it is. It's just another way of um, almost making a smart album. And actually, David, there is a way you can
Yes.
do this. Is that this guy right
Yep.
here?
Yeah, the three dots, the orange dots, once you've created a filtered view, if you want to save that filtered view as a smart album or just with the current images, then you can do so. So you can see on the active filters subtitle, it says the focal length equals 26. And of course, that could be combined with all kinds of other filters as well. You can option click filters to combine them. So if you wanted to see 24 and 30, 34 or whatever, then you can just option click about and that will combine those filter results together. And just to think even deeper, you can actually, you see you've got at the top match all of the following rules.
Right.
Oops, you just lost it. So it says match all of the following rules. So that would means if you had multiple filters, they would all have to be true. But if you said any, then any of those results would return an image. So any image with 1600 ISO, then for example, if you had 24mm lens, then any 24mm lens. If the match was set to all, then it would only be 24mm lenses with at 1600 ISO, for example. So you can do pretty kind of powerful stuff, and you can actually mix those rules as well. But then it's getting pretty complicated. So, but the sky's the limit really with that sort of stuff. And the nice thing is, you see, actually, that's a really good example. Don't get rid of that Aperture one, because Aperture is often recorded in a really weird way in metadata. So you can see that it's recorded as 2.799999, etc. So the benefit of using the filters as opposed to trying to type in an aperture value is that you're not relying on knowing how Canon, Nikon, etc. record an aperture, which is in a wacky way like that. You can actually the filter shows you exactly how it's recorded, so you don't have to think of anything like that. And also with lens models, like if you think, I want to search everything from my Sony 55mm lens, in the metadata it's called like a Sony 55ZE blah blah blah. Whereas if you look in the filters tool, it shows you exactly how it's named, and then you can just tick the radio button and you're all good. So the filters tool is great really for looking at a big collection of images and boiling down to the select few.
Super cool.
Well, I think quite a few people have asked about catalog performance. Now you're working with 90,000 images, so are you on some mega supercomputer or something more modest?
I'm really not, and I wish I were. But, this is a practical solution for me right now. I have three monitors at my desk total, counting my MacBook Pro.
Okay.
Right now, I'm only using one. I have a 27-inch monitor connected. Memory is really my weakness here. Capture One would do a lot better if I had 16 gigs of RAM. I think that's actually the suggested minimum now.
Yep.
I have to check on that offhand, but it gets by. If I weren't working on Thunderbolt with the RAIDs, that would definitely be a choke point for me.
Yep.
Um, that has been a very big gateway. This isn't even Thunderbolt 1. Thunderbolt 2 would give you faster data transfers as well. I don't know if it would load necessarily faster. This is also a RAID 5. The Zeus only has 4 drives. my Pegasus has 6. So
Mm.
the Pegasus, in theory, should be a little bit faster than the Zeus because it's writing across more drives at the same time,
Right, gotcha.
printing
That's
data.
for a MacBook Pro 13-inch. That's pretty impressive, actually. I have to say. So that's good to know. And Capture One 10 um, has had a number of performance tweaks which will
Yes,
benefit older hardware as well. So any of you on older hardware, you're definitely going to see a benefit for 10. Should also point out that Jordan's running Capture One 10.01, which will be released on Monday. I just gave him a sneak preview of it, so 10.01, and that also addresses a couple of performance issues with some graphics cards and so on. So 10.01 should clear up a lot of issues that people had as well. So you can see you don't need a supercomputer by any means of the imagination. I run a MacBook Pro mid-2014 with about 20,000 image catalog, and that runs nice and snappy. I've just been delivered a new 2016 MacBook Pro, which is very exciting. So it'd be interesting to see the comparison that as well. But the main thing to optimize your catalog performance is really a lot of the time about the hard drive. So if you're on an old 5400 RPM hard drive, it's not going to be great. If you're on an internal SSD, it's going to be amazing. So the access speed has a lot to do with that as well.
right.
But when you're switching collections, it's relatively speedy as far as I can see as well.
Yeah, that can be one of the most inducing processes, especially with having the Aperture library connected. I did notice it was a little bit slower after I linked that over because it's reading that database um,
Yes.
from Aperture, but I don't have any complaints. This works very well for me. I don't really have to sit there and wait for it. It does a pretty
Uh,
great job.
to load up. A couple of questions again about your organization. Your finals, are they final TIFFs or final raw files as such?
Sure. So and that actually ties into the speed question too. Everything
Mhm.
I'm working with are raw files with the
Yep.
occasional TIFF if I'm doing some product work. And usually I keep a separate folder outside of Capture One for the really big layered TIFFs that can get to be pretty enormous pretty fast, like a gig or two per shot. Those live over uh, in this folder. So some of those can get to be, like I said, pretty significant. Yeah, that one's a gig. So within Capture One, everything is a raw unless I import a TIFF file, and that's usually without the layers added. Capture One does a great job handling TIFF files. I leave everything as a in raw format until I get to the very end. So my finals are simply just a sorted raw file from my shoot. They're just the images that I want to color correct that I might need to pull from for any purpose. And I think one key with being organized is that photographers today really need to find ways to add more value to their archives, to be multi-purposing their photographs to kind of
Mm.
get more value out of them. And I think having a good organizational structure can help with that. Um, so in this finals folder, these, again, they are all raw until I go to my process recipes, and then from here, I'll export based on what it is I need to do, 16-bit TIFF if I want. It just depends on the purpose and where the photo is going as to the recipe that's set up for exporting different resolutions.
How's the output speed in your machine? Rupert was asking.
Good. I'd say my biggest hangup is my upload speed, actually.
Right.
Capture One can export on this network faster than I can upload, which isn't really saying a whole lot if you were working with my network, but yeah, I don't have any complaints there. If you're buying a computer and you have that option to start, I would definitely recommend an iMac or a MacBook Pro with more RAM. So I'd be curious, David, to hear how that 2016 model
The
goes
super
for you.
machine works,
Yeah.
yeah. I have high hopes for it, so because they're not cheap, of course. So it's got to work for its money for sure.
You know, the other consideration there again is the file resolution. If you're using a phase one body with a 100 megapixel VAC,
For sure.
your files are going to be gigantic. So I don't think I could ever take that on with a MacBook Pro and expect the same level of results that I'm getting with the Nikon D4 or D7100, D3, whatever it happens to be. Um, those files are much smaller. Just as a quick example here, what do I have? Nope, that's looking at the process recipe. I want to see what it would be as a JPEG. Yeah, 11 megs for an exported 4S JPEG. So the RAW is probably about 3 times that size.
And a question, just to be clear, sorry, there's lots of questions, so sorry we can't
Sure.
answer all of them. Just to be clear, Aaron was asking, when you were in New Orleans, so you made a catalog on your laptop called Road Trip South,
Right.
and then you imported that catalog into your master catalog, which sits on your Zeus drive, correct?
Totally. Yep. Yeah, and one of the main reasons that I like using a catalog versus a session is on a trip like that, I was on the road and I was camping most of the time. So I wanted to be able to edit when I was on the road. I wanted to have every day all ready to go. So when I got home, all I really needed to do was a final color correction and I was done. So if I had any downtime in transit from point A to point B, that kind of thing, it was very easy to do. When I imported, it came in just like this, Road Trip South, and I just simply put it where I wanted it to live, and that was it.
Yep, which is a nice way of doing it. I mean, tend to work sessions on the road and then just bring in, like a capture folder into the catalog. But because you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting of organization on the road, then that actually helps a lot when you get back to just dump that into your big catalog and then job's done. So that's really, I might start doing that myself actually.
Nice.
That's really useful actually, really very useful.
Yeah,
Sorry, carry on, Jordan.
I was just going to quickly comment. I wouldn't recommend spending more time doing post-production than photographing when you're traveling. Make the most of that time, but if you happen to have the downtime, I say make the most of it. Anyway, go ahead.
What about, so at some point you might have to go into Photoshop to do any additional work. Do you catalog those, or you're not doing enough work in Photoshop to warrant bothering catalog JPEGs and so on as well?
Well, let me pull up an example here. So here's a product set. Looking at the RAWs first. I have a smart album set up for TIFF. Actually, that might even just be a normal album. That could be a smart album.
Yeah, you could have a smart album sorting by file format. Yes, you could do that.
Right. And then this is set up to show all of the files I wanted to reference for a layer mask in Photoshop. So I exported these auto align and then start to brush in with a layer mask. And for me, like I said, I keep most of those in a folder of some sort, just again because the files get to be so significant, and then I'll strip down an additional TIFF that has just that primary finished layer and bring that back into Capture One, and that lives there. So if I wanted to, I could quickly sort for all TIFFs in the entire catalog, and everything would show up. Now that would bring in things from other categories if applicable, but yeah, you could totally keyword everything if you wanted to. There's so many ways of doing that.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the questions. Oh yeah, how to save part of a catalog as a new catalog. We did cover that, but if you could just right-click on a project or something, just so Mark can see.
So
any collection, like a group, a project, an album, you can say export as catalog. And then when you say export as catalog, you do have the option to include the originals within that catalog. See that checkbox there? So then that will make you a brand new standalone catalog as per the organization if you've exported a project with all the originals inside as well. So it works pretty nicely.
That's actually what I did with this kitchen shoot right before we started. I exported a catalog or a group from Capture One just so that it would be a standalone option. So that's exactly what it would look like after it comes out of Capture One.
Yeah, perfect. Could you just right click on your nav file for a second? Because a couple of people weren't sure how to round trip. But if you right click on an image, you'll see, where is it? Edit with. So just about there, that's right. And then if you want to, oh, you can't do that from a smart album because you need to know the absolute location of it. So any other collection as such, you can edit with, and then that will take you into Photoshop.
I
Do
tried
your
that.
edit, and then it will bring that back to Capture One if you wish. But that's kind of only useful if you're doing one image at a time. If you're gonna need to do Photoshop work on like 100 images, it's way quicker to export them in a batch, do your 100 images, and then just import those back into the catalog. So the edit with is really only handy if you're doing just one image at a time. If you're doing a batch, it's way faster to make a process recipe, do your Photoshop, and then bring that back into catalog if you wish as well. Okay, how are we doing for time? Actually, we're nearly out of time, aren't we? That went faster than this morning, didn't it? Well,
Go on.
while we've got process recipes up, that's a good thing to show for the Lightroom / Aperture people out there, because it's a really, again, good workflow enhancement for Capture One. So the idea is you create a process recipe to avoid having to go into an export dialog, because going into an export dialog slows you down. So the point is that you design as many process recipes as you like. You can trigger multiple process recipes at the same time. So if you wanted to export full JPEG, 16-bit TIFFs, Facebook shots all at the same time, you just need to tick the process recipes and process. And then just walk away from the computer and let it do its thing. You don't have to keep going back into a dialogue to re-trigger another export. That's a big time saver for
Yes,
exporting. Yeah.
definitely. I just discovered recently that you can save shortcuts for output naming presets, which is absolutely wonderful. It was like one of my
Yes.
most time-consuming parts of it. It was like, okay, where did I leave off? And this was another one that threw me switching from Aperture. You can set or reset the output counter. So if you wanted it to start at 0 or at 1 or any other number for that matter,
Correct.
you can define that, and that will update your sample image, your file name.
Absolutely. And all of this stuff you can throw into shortcuts as well. So if you're shooting tethered, switching to different folders to shoot into, you can have shortcuts for resetting the counter, opening up that dialog to change something else. There's pretty much shortcuts for everything, so which does make everything much quicker too. Well, unfortunately, I think we're pretty much out of time there, Jordan.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
I know.
Just trying to have fun.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's that there often isn't enough time to go in depth, but hopefully what you can take away is a little bit of inspiration and insight into the possibilities of having a good catalog. The follow-up email that you'll get, you'll find quite a lot of resources on there as well. And one of those, which you can see on the screen, is also our blog. I forgot you wrote a blog post, Jordan. So that was your thoughts on moving from Aperture and the sort of hurdles you found and how you got over them and so on.
Yeah, there's a couple blog posts now I've gotten to write. So if you want to learn a little bit more in depth or even ask questions, that's a good forum for it.
Yeah, and in the follow-up email, I've put Jordan's details if you want to follow him on Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. You'll find the links to the tutorials and so on. There's a tutorial called Managing Your Capture One Catalog which is about 8 minutes long, and that goes through again what you can do with the various different groups, projects, and so on. And as we said, you can't break a catalog, you can't break images. Capture One only ever reads images, we never write anything back to it. So make a small catalog of 100 images, mess around with the various different collections, and then get to a system which makes sense for you. I mean, Jordan's is a really good example of having that top level for the group, and then for each of your various different projects, and dividing it up like that. That's a really kind of nice way to organize exactly what you've done there. So a group for each kind of photography genre, I guess, and then within that group you've got individual projects for each project, and within that project, you've got albums, smart albums of those particular images. So I think that's a really, really nice way to organize, actually. So everyone should screen grab that right now. Because and you can see your user collection area stays nice and tidy because of using those various different groups.
Here, I'll set this up so people can screen grab if they want to get an idea of.
Yeah.
That was something that I really wanted this actually when I switched. This would have been perfect for me. This is exactly what I needed to see, that someone else organized the way I
Yeah,
thought.
I think that's a great way to do it. And you're using the organizational items exactly kind of as we hoped someone would, to be honest. I mean, there's of course more we can do in Capture One with catalogs and so on. We've already added functionality in version 10, like you can move folders around. Oh, now you've opened that. Open up that folders icon there. So you can see that icon called catalog, which says 24,269. That's how many images are stored inside the catalog itself. I can't remember who was asking, but I saw your question come up. So if you want to convert managed images to referenced and vice versa, all you need to do is click on the catalog icon and then drag an image from managed to reference. It's as simple as that, or vice versa. So that works really very simply. So on that note, I'm afraid I think we have to sort of stop there. I'm sorry that we couldn't necessarily get to all of your questions. I'm just going to steal the presentership
Go for
back
it.
from you, Jordan. Let's say not yet.
Yeah, great questions, the ones we got to.
Yeah, and say I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, I'm afraid, but within the time allowed, often it's not possible. And there was rather a lot of you as well. If you want to come back again, that would be nice. January 19th, that's next week. We've got another guest, festooned with guests in January, John Shell. He's a lifestyle photographer, West Coast US. Shoots with Fuji as well. So if you're a Fuji user, I think you enjoy listening to him. And here just go through his color grading techniques, adjustment techniques in Capture One. Really nice guy. Should be a good fun webinar to tune into, I would think so. As I said, there'll be a follow-up email in roughly probably fastest 1 hour, longest 24 hours, depends on their systems, and then you'll find all the resources in there that we've spoken about as well. So thanks, Jordan, for spending your time and letting us copy your structure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I hope it helps a lot of people.
Yeah, I definitely think it will. It's always good to see what other people are doing. I always learn from my colleagues. I learned something from one of my colleagues today I'd never seen in Capture One before. Like, how did you do that? So yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, really. So Trace, sorry, says, I now consider Aperture as Capture One Lite. That's what we like to hear. So
I would second that.
yeah. I mean, in terms of image quality, it's a no-brainer. I mean, not to take anything away from Aperture in terms of its database was great, but in terms of image quality, it really is a no-brainer. I mean, Apple haven't really spent a lot of R&D or time on changing the sort of raw conversion aspect, which is a shame because Aperture was really the pioneer of raw conversion a long time ago, but it's fallen by the wayside as such. But hey, that's good news for phase one and stuff, so I shouldn't complain.
Yeah, I've reprocessed a lot of my images from Aperture and Capture One, and it's like a free camera upgrade. It's really remarkable.
Absolutely. All right, Jordan, many thanks for your time, and let's stay in touch, and we'll see you on the blog in future as well.
Thanks, David.
Cheers, take care. Bye now.
Bye.